Hey, good morning guys. Great morning here. We've got fresh, clean air. It's the best we've had in quite a while. I'm really excited about that. I came outside to start the video this morning and I'm noticing we reached our dew point. Go outside, touch the ground. There's dew all over the place. Our dew point we hit, which is fantastic. Those of you who are working on your precipitation simulator will know what I'm talking about. The dew point is where the particles in the air have come close enough together that we're actually finding condensation on things. And then yesterday we were talking about Venus and the chances of there being possibilities of life on Venus, and look at this. That's Venus right there, that little spot in the sky. Venus is going to be the first bright spot you see in the morning because it's orbiting closer to the sun, so when the sun's going up or the sun's going down, it's going to be that thing right there. That's Venus. Yesterday, I was talking about Venus. People started asking questions about space and we got on the topic of satellites, so I thought today I'd make the video about satellites. So we're gonna learn about satellites today. Earth's first man-made satellite, not the moon, the first one that was made by man, was called Sputnik. And this was produced by the Soviet Union in 1958. And this was huge, hugely important, not just on the technological level, on the science level, but also for society. We'll get into that. So right now, let's talk about what was Sputnik. World War II ended in 1945, and at the end of that war, you had two great nations, the Soviet Union, which is basically what Russia is today, except it was a bit larger, and then the United States. These were the two superpowers that entered into what's called a Cold War. We weren't actually fighting each other, but we were in this intense competition of trying to see who was better, who was more powerful, who would be the ultimate superpower over all of the world. One thing scientists were working on at the time was rocketry and satellites. We wanted to see, can we get something up into the air all the way to the other side of the world? Because if we could, that meant that we could have something like a weapon that might go all the way to that country on the other side of the world. Or if we could get a satellite to fly over, then you could take pictures and find out what that other country was doing. Spy technology. This was a big deal during the Cold War. It was a war driven by fear. Now you need to understand, a satellite is something that orbits a planet. So we have the moon, that's a satellite, but that's a natural satellite. We, in 1958, didn't have any satellites that were man-made until Sputnik. Sputnik was the first man-made satellite produced by the Soviet Union. Both sides were working on satellites, trying to get them up, trying to get them working, but then in May of 1958, anyone with a radio could tune in to a certain frequency and noticed a strange sound that wasn't there before. That sound was the broadcast of Sputnik. Sputnik was a satellite that was about the size of a beach ball. Okay, let's say maybe about twice the size of this one. A beach ball with 3 or 4 antennas sticking out from it. It wasn't complicated, it was just a shell, but it proved its point. It proved that, hey, the Soviet Union can get something up in the air all the way on the other side of the world, and it came around, and it came around, and every time it passed by, you could hear, not with your ears, but tuning into a radio station, you could tune in and hear that broadcast. It was sending out a message saying, hi, I'm here. Sputnik orbited about 131 miles above the Earth, an area of the layers of our atmosphere that has a lot of satellites in it, actually. Let's talk about what the layers of the atmosphere are. Down here at the basic level, we have the troposphere. The troposphere is where we live. It's where we have mountains, it's where we have clouds. Most of the weather that happens here happens in the troposphere. Next level up is the stratosphere. This is where planes fly. It's a little bit higher up and it goes up quite a ways. Next level we have is the ozone layer. Ozone layer is where we have those 3 atoms of oxygen that are attached to each other, and this layer provides a nice layer of protection from the ultraviolet rays of the sun, helps us from getting skin cancer and other problems that come from those ultraviolet rays. Next layer up is the mesosphere. The mesosphere is where we start to see meteors burn up. This is where the molecules of air are getting closer and closer together, because as they're coming into the Earth's atmosphere, it's the first time that they're really encountering enough air particles that are in the way to create friction. burning up the edges of them until they burn up into ashes and they just fall to Earth as little particles. The thermosphere is the area where satellites fly. We've got a lot of satellites in the thermosphere. Thermosphere still has air particles, molecules of air floating around there, but they are really far apart. This is good for satellites because it means that there's less friction to slow them down as they're traveling around the planet. Finally, we have the exosphere. The exosphere is the layer outside of that has just very, very few air particles at all. And so we have more satellites there, and including the International Space Station where we have people orbiting the Earth. It's important to understand density, to understand why we have those satellites where we do. I'm going to demonstrate this using some liquids, but liquids work like fluids, like air is a fluid and liquids are a fluid. So it's something that can flow, and we're going to look at how different densities affect the properties of that substance. So I'm going to demonstrate this with 4 different substances. First is going to be the corn syrup. This is a really thick stuff with the molecules packed closely together. I'm going to use some water. I just added some blue food coloring for fun. I'm going to use some vegetable oil. Molecules are spaced far apart from each other in this substance. And then I'll use some glass marbles. These are really dense. And a wood bead. And maybe you can guess if that's going to float or sink or if it's going to go somewhere in between. So at ground level, you have the densest air. So let's start with some corn syrup. We'll put some corn syrup in here. That's the densest air. That is going to be the first layer of our atmosphere, our troposphere. Then let's put in, what should we put in next? Let's put in, how about the water? So water is going to be our next level. And as I pour it in, you'll notice that while it mixes a little bit as the force of it coming down goes into the corn syrup, it rises back up because it's less dense. It wants to be at this layer because the molecules are further apart than at this layer where they are closer together. And now, vegetable oil. Put vegetable oil on it. Is rising to the surface. And you guys can see we've got 3 clear layers here because they have separated based on their density. Now, glass. Glass is going to be denser than all of them, right? So let's see what it does. Will it float? Will it sink? Will it rise somewhere in the middle? Oh, it sank. You can see as it goes through the different layers, it slows down. And that's like when the meteors are going through the mesosphere and they're starting to get slowed down by those air particles. Oh, it looks like we have one marble that is a slightly different density. You can see that it got stuck in between layers. And that tells me what density it is. All right, now let's try the wood bead. Wood bead didn't even go to the level of the vegetable oil. It's still stuck at the top of the vegetable oil with a little bit of it poking over the surface. This is a good experiment you guys can try at home. Find 3 or 4 different liquids and mix them together, see what they do. Another thing you can try, if you do this, do it in a bottle and you can shake them up, and you should be able to see over time the 3 different liquids separate. At ground level, you have the densest air, and then as you go higher and higher in altitude, the air gets thinner and thinner. You can see this when you go up the mountains, you're driving up the mountains and you have the ear pressure changes, and you can feel that pressure in your ear because there's less air particles pushing on them. And you can see it in a bag of chips that suddenly appears like it inflated, and it's got the same amount of air particles inside it. It's just they're not feeling the pressure from all the weight of the atmosphere above it anymore, so they're spreading out a little bit more. Same thing with water bottles. I've had water bottles that crinkle and crack and expand as they move up the hill because they're getting less and less air pressure on them. Getting back to Sputnik. So once the United States realized that the Soviet Union had a way to get a satellite all the way to our side of the planet and take pictures or send rockets or whatever it was going to be, we were a little bit afraid and we kicked into high gear. We started putting more money and effort into math and science education. We started what's called the space race, and we were really successful at it. We put people into space, we put up more satellites. We've got about 20,000 satellites now. We've got people that have gone to the moon, we've got people in orbit, We've had space probes go out to all different planets and heading out into the far, far reaches of our solar system. We'll talk some more about satellites another time. Guys, enjoy the rest of your day and check out these links to learn more about satellites and layers of the atmosphere.